we live?
Yes, Mr. Rajul, we are live. Please go ahead.
Perfect. So, good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to IRM India Affiliates exclusive event in collaboration with ASSOCHAM on enterprise risk management in a post-pandemic world for education leaders. IRM is the world's leading professional body for enterprise risk management exams from level 1 to level 5 across 143 countries. Now, colleges and universities are a cross section of many interests, which can result in a bundle of diverse and potential risks. Some of these risks have manifested themselves in recent high profile transgressions, raising serious questions about institutional leadership, governance, and the ethical standards employed across educational institutes. These are risks related to businesses and operating models, compliance, reputation, and the variability of student enrollment, which can create financial and resource gaps and imbalances. Now, to address these exposures, college and universities need to strengthen their enterprise risk management strategies. Leaders are in need of techniques to manage the complex portfolios of risk they now face. Many are turning to ERM to help them establish a more robust risk mindset because it helps link institute governance, risk management, and the strategic goals of the institution. Leaders are beginning to find that ERM is an effective method to manage all the risks that exist on a college or university campus. ERM is helping education institutions to sustain their competitive advantage, solidify their integrity and reputation, respond effectively when a significant event occurs, avoiding financial surprises, and effectively management of all their resources. I'm very happy IRM India affiliate is proud to present a specially curated panel discussion for educational leaders for today and tomorrow. Our esteemed panel members consist of Mr. Harsha, who is the CEO of IRM India affiliate and a member of ASSOCHAM, National Council of Education. We have Professor Arnab Kelaha, who is the member of the faculty of the IIM Ahmedabad and has been named as one of the 20 most prominent analytics and data science academicians in India by Analytics India magazine in 2018. We have Mr. Sanjay K. Mathur, Vice President Governance, Risk Management and Compliance at Tata Communications. We have Mr. Neeraj Basur, Global Chief Financial Officer at Blue Star Limited. I welcome you all. Now, without any further delay, my first question for today's panel discussion is to Mr. Neeraj Basur. Mr. Neeraj, sir, what is risk and how is ERM different from financial risk management? Can you draw some live examples, any case studies of how you have seen risk landscape evolves?
Thank you, Raju. Am I audible? So just
Yes,
doing
sir, please.
just a quick sound check. All right, thanks a lot. Right, so thanks a lot for having me on this program, and a very good evening to all the participants and my co-panelists. It's indeed a privilege and an honor for me to be amongst this gathering today and just share my thoughts, my learning, etc. So Raju, you raised a very interesting question, and let me try and address that in 2 or 3 parts. So you're asking basically, financial risk management versus risk management and risk per se. So these are 2 or 3 different subjects. So let me first talk a little bit about financial risk management. Then I'll jump into then what is risk and what is ERM and how does it relate. Financial risk management, the way we typically look at it from a overall business perspective, relates to some very specific and some key risks that arise in the operational framework of an organization. So, for example, inflation, for example, volatility in the capital markets, for example, the risk of financing or refinancing, risk of liquidity, risk of currency or commodity, or let's say credit risk. So these are just some examples of what a basket of risks would potentially relate to financial risk. So when an organization carries out its day-to-day operation, pretty much each and every element of the organization's transactional framework will have a financial link attached to it, or most of it. So any transaction that the organization enters into, be it sale, purchase, or payment or receipts, will give rise to a financial transaction and therefore a financial risk. And of course, how those risks are identified, how those risks are evaluated, how those risks get prioritized, how those risks are mitigated, and typically there is a operating entire risk management framework around those risks, which become very relevant from the point of view of when we are exclusively focusing on the financial risk. However, let me come to the main point of your main part of a question, which is then what is risk management? What does enterprise risk management deal with? Now that's a very good perspective to have, because enterprise risk management is a very large and a very broad subject to deal with. So when we talk about risk, so what is the risk? Risk is the uncertainty attached with any decision, right? And it could be every decision or every action that we undertake has certain uncertainties attached with it, and how to deal with those uncertainties and how to manage the consequences of those uncertainties is within the purview of that risk. Enterprise risk management, on the contrary, is a subject, and if you apply the COSO 2017 framework, which is the one which I like to follow a lot, it says that integration of risk management with strategy and performance is the core of this framework, the COSO framework. So risk management essentially acts as a bridge. Enterprise risk management acts as a bridge between strategy and performance. So anything to do with from identifying the strategy and ensuring that the performance of a business is in line with the chosen strategy. ERM is a conduit, is a bridge which enables an organization to first select the right strategy in line with its vision, core values, and then go to the objectives and then enable the performance achievement. So using that lens, if we use that lens, that enterprise risk management first point is a much wider platform, goes much beyond the components such as a financial risk or an operating risk or a competitive risk, environment risk. So that's a all-pervasive platform, ERM, and it will help sharpen the strategy formulation and strategy execution. So what will ERM help us to achieve, or what does ERM help an organization to achieve? So there are some 6 points I want to make here, or 6 thoughts I want to leave you with. So first and foremost, why ERM? It helps to increase the range of opportunities that any organization, any enterprise is then able to explore, exploit, or make the most out of it. Now, if you see again this COSO 2017 ERM framework, there is a section which deals with how to respond to a risk. So there is a risk response discussion, and there are 5 buckets or 5 pillars of risk response that are covered there. So what are those? You either accept risk, you avoid risk, you reduce risk, you share risk, or you pursue risk. Now this 5th one is very important, very interesting and very important. Pursue risk. What does that mean? Pursuing risk is when you get so engrossed or so highly qualified to manage a risk effectively. When an organization and enterprise manages risk effectively, it starts to translate into opportunities. So first and foremost, an ERM framework helps increase the range of opportunities if we start pursuing risk rather than avoiding risk or just having a defensive play. So to that extent, opportunities, so risk management is now getting involved in opportunity realization for the enterprise in line with the strategy. So that's the first point. The second important objective of ERM is to identify and mitigate risks at an entity level. because we started with financial risk. Financial risk could relate to a part of the enterprise, but ERM enables us to have a portfolio view of all pervasive risks that an entity could be exposed to. A lot of times what happens, a risk, let's say at a divisional level or at a micro level might not be material enough, might not be relevant enough. But then when such risks get aggregated at a portfolio level, it can change the picture. So ERM enables us to take an entity-wide view. The third important difference between an isolated risk or ERM is ERM increases positive outcome and it reduces any negative surprises. So look at it from an investor's viewpoint. As an investor in any enterprise, any business, no one wants negative surprises to hit them out of the blue, and everyone is eagerly awaiting for any positive outcome. Now that's what ERM helps to achieve, because if there is a very methodical ERM program running, at the least there'll be awareness among. So in the annual reports, integrated report for example, there is a section required on risk management. A very detailed section is required. Now, integrated report, to the extent it's applicable, that is the opportunity for any enterprise to talk about risks and how they are being mitigated, so that a reader, the investor, the banker, the credit rating agency does not have a negative surprise. So for example, if there was an ALM, a key sensitivity to a business, I'm not taking a name of an entity here. So an ALM mismatch, if an ALM is flagged as a key risk, then the investor is cautioned. So they know ALM mismatch could result in a nasty shock, and be aware. So that's the third main advantage. The fourth one is to reduce performance variability. Now, what does this mean? If there is an ERM platform which is well-oiled and working well, performance variability not necessarily does not only mean that the plan was X and the achievement is 10%, 20, 30% below X. That's of course one form of variability, that you have planned for something as an objective, but then the achievement was 30 or 40%. Performance variability also deals with positive variances. Now that could just, I'll try and illustrate the point. So for a bank, for example, let's say the bank is capitalized with 100 rupees of capital, and with that 100 rupees capital keeping in mind their capital adequacy norms, at best they can go up to 200 rupees of borrowed loans. Let's say that's the equation. Now, if that bank starts processing proposals which would end up requiring them to have, let's say loans are worth 300 rupees or 250 rupees, and they have capital only 100 rupees. So while that's a positive variance, positive variability, that doesn't help, because that is something they need to plan for, raise capital. Similarly, a consumer durable company, if they spread themselves too thin without having a servicing network, and if the sales just shoot through the roof, so that kind of performance variability gets flagged as a risk if there is a proper ERM platform, and you can deal with it proactively. The fifth one is to improve resource deployment. Now, what does this mean? Now, if risks are properly identified, evaluated, mitigated, resources are scarce. Whether it is people, whether it is financial capital, whichever form of resource you want to consider, the resource allocation decisions become very critical when it comes to overall risk management. So that's one important. And the last one is to deal with enhancing enterprise resilience. And Rajul, you talked about just one example of how risk management has changed in the recent times. I want to use this last one to illustrate that point and give an example. So enterprise resilience is a very important and a very sensitive, very critical aspect of managing businesses now in the last 2 years in particular. Now, all of us have, the example I want to give you is around business continuity risk. Now, this risk, business continuity risk, used to feature on every company's risk registers for ages. And of course, quite a few companies did work on it around a BCP policy and SOPs and mock drills, this, that, and the other. But the kind of BCP testing that has happened in the last 2 years, now just consider how many risks have got, the mitigation strategies or mitigation plans have got tested in ever since this pandemic broke off. Technology resiliency, health and safety risks, financial resiliency, and operating environment resiliency. So the entire context, what you will see now, if you just, and since there are a lot of academicians on this call, I would encourage you to do some case study 6 months or 1 year down the line, or even now if you want to do it, you will see two different classes of enterprises emerge very, very clearly. The enterprises who are witnessing a V-shaped recovery, who witnessed a V-shaped recovery last year, and who are going to witness a V-shaped recovery kind of this year again, you will invariably find were very sharp on their toes on enterprise risk management. And that's a big differentiator. And companies who have struggled or still struggling probably were a little unaware or not so aware about, how to handle some of these events. So I'll just stop here because this can go on for longer. There are other speakers to follow as well. So Rajul, a long answer to your short question is financial risk management is a subset of enterprise risk management. ERM, consider COSO 2017 framework, very powerful framework. And clearly in the last 1.5, 2 years, we are all living risk management. Thank you.
Thank you, Neeraj Bashar. I just have one question, and that was since the start of the session, that a company should pursue risk and not avoid risk. You see companies avoiding it. When you read newspaper articles, there are offices who are planning to mitigate risk, but we haven't seen any articles. Could you like that?
Sorry, am I the only one who missed Rajul's question a little bit? Rajul,
Am I audible?
Can you just repeat your question very briefly? You're audible
Yeah.
now. Maybe I missed a part of your question, please. Can you just repeat it, please?
Okay, perfect. So in the start of your session, you said something very wonderful, very thought-provoking, which was a company should pursue risk rather than avoiding risk.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate more on that? Because when you read articles in newspaper, that is just the complete opposite. So this is a very great thinking. Could you just throw more light on it?
Sure, Raju. Sure. I got the question now. See, just reflect the title of today's discussion and the title of the subject is ERM, right? It is enterprise risk management. It is not enterprise risk avoidance. So risk management is at the foundation. Okay, now I'll try and illustrate my point by giving an example. Probably that will illustrate it better. Now you consider, and here I'll take a name because it's a publicly listed company, Bajaj Finance. Everyone is aware Bajaj Finance is an NBFC. They lend money to retail customers when they go out to buy consumer durables stores. So what is the core business of Bajaj Finance? The core business of Bajaj Finance is to lend money, and then of course when they get the money back, they are earning their interest margins, and that's the business model. The central risk to their business is credit risk profile of their customers. Okay, now they can take a view that look, a retail customer, very difficult to predict or follow or kind of find out what their risk profile is, and therefore limit or restrict growth or avoid certain customers. What Bajaj Finance has done very effectively, they have deployed technology and some proprietary tools so that when a customer walks into a store and when this customer is still looking around, to buy a refrigerator or a TV or a AC, and he's already given the Aadhaar number, etc. So in those 5 or 7 minutes, Bajaj Finance is able to do a credit risk appraisal of that customer in less than 10 minutes. So they have, and then they make a decision very quickly. So whether to extend credit or not to extend credit. Now they have learned to manage the risk using technology and their own analytics so effectively that they are ready to pursue risk, they are ready to pursue growth, because their core business model is managing credit risk. Similar example will be there for insurance companies, because insurance companies are in the business of managing either a life risk or a health risk or a property and casualty risk. So an insurance company needs to learn how to manage those risks, and then you can pursue that opportunity, because that's the first point I made. Increase the range of opportunities, right? So when you learn how to manage your risk
Right.
effectively and impactfully, it becomes an opportunity. And that's where it connects to the strategy and growth and performance.
Right. I really love the idea of connecting risk to opportunity. That is such a fresh takeaway. Thank you, Neeraj sir. Now, I'd like to address my next question to Professor Arnab. Now, Professor Arnab, there are various typical risks faced by education institutes and leaders from an enterprise perspective. I just want to know, what are these risks and how are leaders mitigating such risks? Over to you, sir. Professor Arnab, you are on mute.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, let me just recap what Mr. Neeraj just now said, and I think if you look at the definition of risk, and if you look at ISO 31000, which is like also another standard for risk management, enterprise risk management, I think they define risk very nicely. It says that risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. So I think if you have to understand risk, you have to understand the objectives of the organization. And for educational institutes, this is a major challenge. So what are the objectives of an educational institute? Now, the obvious objective is that it will impart knowledge and skill on some dimensions. So if it's a management institute, it will impart knowledge and skills of management. If it's an engineering institute, it will impart knowledge and skills of engineering. If it's a, say, institute in humanities, it will impart knowledge and skills on humanities and related topics. So that's the defined objective. But apart from that, we have to recognize that an educational institute operates in a society. So there is a societal context. And among one of the key things that society demands of young graduates of institutes or even from schools is that they would be good citizens. So they would develop good citizenship behavior as part of their training. So therefore, an educational institute's objectives are manifold. So among the other objectives that any organization has, like it has to be self-sustaining in terms of finance. So there will be financial objectives. There will be objectives related to attracting human capital. So you want the best faculty to be working with you. You want the best students to come to you. So that will be another objective. So there will be multiple objectives in this. And whenever you are dealing with many stakeholders, including society as a big stakeholder, you have to see that risk does not impact any of your stakeholders, or rather, I would say that that you have to mitigate the risk that that your organization generates for any of the stakeholders, which would include students, parents, society, your staff members, and so on. So therefore, enterprise risk management is critical for educational institutions. Now, is it being done in a very systematic manner in India? Well, not quite. There are a few notable exceptions who try to do this, but most organizations in India do not have an enterprise risk management as of now. But what we are seeing in the Western context is that more and more educational institutions are trying to incorporate these principles of enterprise risk management in their day-to-day work. Now, what are the advantages of having such a program? So one major advantage of having an enterprise risk management program is, and that's what I think my other two co-panelists will say that as the first step, is to have a risk register. And the risk register, by the way, is a very important document. So it tells you what all risks your organization faces. So without a risk register and a good process of eliciting the risks, you never know what are the risks your organization faces. So if you see the education sector during the pandemic, some of the organizations like ours have not been affected much. So most IIMs have been able to carry on their business with very little impact, maybe a few days delay here and there, but apart from that, we have not been impacted. This has been true for most global universities, which have not been majorly impacted because we were sort of ready, or we had the processes in place which would allow us to move from a completely classroom setup to an entirely online setup. But this is not the story for all organizations across the country. So there have been many organizations, educational organizations, which have been badly affected. They have not been able to smoothly transition from a classroom environment to an online environment. Now, for those students who are studying in these organizations, which have not been able to make this smooth transition, the costs are high. It has to be remembered that education is a very different kind of a product. It's just like medicine. So here, so you are giving a service which will transform your client. So if you think of the student, quote unquote, as a client, which I don't like to use the word client, but if you think of that as a client, even if you don't charge a penny from the student and give all the skills and knowledge for 1 year, it is not free, because the student has invested 1 year of his life, of the vital 1 year of his life in your hands. So it is a process in which both the student gets transformed and by imbibing the skills. So it's very important for the student. So some part of the cost is shown, which is the fees that they pay, the cost of books and materials, and a large part of the cost is not even seen. It is the cost of your time, the cost of your time, the sacrifice of your family and other members of the society who would sort of invest in you, hoping that you would return those investments in the future back to the society. So so just if you say that, okay, my school did not run for 1 year, I did not charge a penny from my students, that is not a good thing, because the student nevertheless has lost 1 year of time from his life, which is finite. Okay, so as of now, most of us will die within 100. So 1 year of your life out of 100 is lost, and which is a vital year of your life is lost. So it's very, very important that we manage risks well. Now, what are the risks that faces educational institution was one part of your question. There are many. So some of these risks are traditional. I've already talked about, like there is financial risk, the risk of both generating revenues as well as the cost that you incur. There is a major problem with talent acquisition in most organizations. That means getting teachers, good teachers, to teach the courses is a major challenge. In a country like India, it's a very difficult challenge, particularly in a rural area, to get good people to teach in classrooms. We have also challenges of having motivated students in the classroom. So it is not about having a body in the classroom. A body who is willing to learn is very important. And that is, again, determined by a lot of factors, which is a large part of that is societal. So you have a challenge of having students in your classroom and motivated enough to learn. You also have other kinds of challenges, particularly in this pandemic. We have technology challenges. Mediums such as WebEx or Zoom or Google Meet have been extremely useful in doing this emergency transition to online. But if you want to do it for a longer period of time, you will have to have a much more well-crafted strategy towards technology, even in educational institutions. And that has to be up to the mark, because this may be a grey rhino event which we which we are facing for the last 1.5 years, but there is no guarantee that we will not face another one in 2 years' time or 10 years' time. So one has to be prepared for that. Education sector is also facing a major disruption. So it is one of the sectors along with health which is up for major disruption. So there are ample indications of how student behavior is changing, how their attention spans are changing, how their interest is changing, and how technology is facilitating all this. In a world where most students are almost always on social media, particularly among the class which has access to the internet, you need different strategies to engage them. And COVID has put another major challenge that you have to engage them online for substantial period of time. So and once this habits form, it might actually be a permanent habit where people will like to learn online, and that's again a major challenge that that education leaders of the future will have to look at it. So education leaders of tomorrow will have to sort of figure out not only the risks before them, which would of course be determined by whatever uncertainty they face in pursuance of their objectives. And during the process, as Mr. Neeraj nicely said, they would be able to identify opportunities for future growth. So if an organization invests in risk management, I am absolutely confident that during the process of risk appraisal and mitigation that they do, they will figure out zones where they can pursue growth opportunities and make their institutions much better. And I think that would be a good thing, not only for them in terms of their successes, but also good for the society, as we will produce much better students in the future. So I think I will stop here and give up. I will take your other questions.
Thank you, Professor Arnab. That was really insightful. I just have one question, and that was a very lovely takeaways. You said that education institutes are ready for a disruption, right? When you use the word disruption, I don't know why I think it's a synonym of risk also, because when you say disruption, there will be a new types of risk which the industry has not faced, right? So what do you think exactly? So what do you think? What kind of risks are waiting for educational institutes?
I think so. Disruption often happens. It starts off very small and then suddenly explodes. So we are seeing some trends. One thing which people talked about as disruption has become very commonplace due to COVID-19. That's the technology-enabled learning. Another kind of thing is happening, and that is, I think, as educational institutes, we are also we have to think about it. That is it important for you to have a degree, or is it enough to have the skills? So what some of the leading players in the world are sort of trialing is that if we do not look for the degree, can we get better people? So is it an overkill to see that we will only recruit from Harvard or MIT or IIM or so on? Is it not possible for us to have talents, high quality talent early on and train them according by our own institute, either through a partnership with any of the educational institutes or creating training academies just like GE did many years back. So I think there can be a major shift in the demand for high prestige degrees, because if organization starts to move towards a future in which they would be more keen on having the skills and knowledge and not necessarily a degree. I am not saying that they will not say that if you have the degree, you are disqualified. I am not saying that. But they may actually say that, okay, you don't have the degree, but you have the skills and knowledge. Why don't you come and join us, and let's see whether you can be successful together. So this can be a major disruption for many established organizations. And of course, there can be other models of learning which is being tried out. Say, for example, there are organizations which are trying out remote laboratories. They're trying out entirely augmented reality-based training in some, even in technical fields. So those kind of things can have a very, I would say, sharp changes in the way educational institutes operate today. And that is what I would broadly call a disruption.
Thank you, Professor. Now, just one question. You said that the new era will respect skill more than the degree. Now, isn't that a huge risk for universities? Because
It is.
Yeah.
It is. So if an university becomes complacent and start feeling that I get students because my degree is so valued, it can face problems. Maybe not in the near future, maybe not in 2 years, 5 year time, but definitely in 10, 15 year time, where people may actually not come to them. They can, if say a certification by Coursera on a course is good enough to get a excellent job in any of the companies represented today here, why should the people spend a fortune to get the degree? So I think that is a significant risk the universities would face.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to address my next question to Mr. Sanjay. Now, Sanjay, given your experience as a chief risk officer in the corporate world, what best practices can university follow to set up a risk department and manage enterprise risk?
Yeah, thank you, Rajul. Am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for this interesting session, and I feel privileged to be part of all the educationists to discuss my views on the risk management. And I'm 100% in the agreement with the professor and Neeraj on these two topics. Before I start, addressing the question which you have asked me, how the risk management has been, run in the organization where I worked in Tata Communications, I just want to split this question into two parts and just share a few views what I think of the risk. Although I agree most of the concept which has been talked by both of fellow panelists, but in my view, the risk, if I simply define in few words, is the risk is what is left over when you think that you have thought of everything. So basically, when you think that I have taken all the precautions to manage my business, whether it's an institution or whether it's an organization, but what is left behind, which can hit into, and in the past, if you take the historical event, that event has been actually impacted the organization in a big way. So this is where is the risk as a simple definition. And I strongly believe, and I think Professor has also mentioned this, that both risk and opportunity are the two different sides of the coins. This is not different. And I give an example when the pandemic came into, and it was a risk for the well-established universities or education institute. But if you realize that one of the other education platform has got the highest valuation done, and that's what is happening into the country. So I think this goes together. I give another example. I'm sure most of you following the football, the recent reaction of Ronaldo moving a Coca-Cola bottle from his desk has reduced the valuation of Coke by $1 billion. So this is like, but you see the reaction which has come from Pidilite, which talks about the Fevicol, or the Amul, who talks about their brand image. So they created the brand based on the recent event which is happening across. So one risk happened for one company, but if you see how the competitor or some irrelevant industries reacted on that. Now, whether this has contributed to their revenue is a different story, but the brand is putting into the mindset of the people. And that's where I would like to start and say enterprise risk management is something much, much more bigger than the financial risk or the insurance risk, which is traditionally been managed by all of us. And I'm a firm believer of a simplification. So I will take one more minute pause and say, what is the risk? And this myth is that we all are managing risk. Is I have a slightly different opinion. So basically, when you move, when anybody cross the road, the risk is the crossing the road. Now there are various events happen when you cross the road, and your mind, nobody have actually, from childhood, nobody except when you're a child, your father will tell you that how do you cross the road, but thereafter your mind automatically work on the mitigation on the upcoming risk, and then what you control is your reaction. So I think there is some myth which say that we will manage the risk. I don't see that any organization is big enough to manage the risk. They actually manage the consequence or the mitigation of the risk, which ultimately go and reduce the impact or frequency of the risk to happen. So let's take example of pandemic. Pandemic as a risk was not thought by many companies, but what pandemic has actually done, they have restricted the access of the people to their office. So that means you need to work from a remote. Now, this could be by different events, like if there is a flood in a local place, and if you are not able to reach out to office, the same event happened, but the risk is the same. So there are two different events, the flood, a terrorist attack, or a pandemic. These could are the event which could trigger to one risk. We say that you will not able to reach out to your office. Now, how do you manage that? Now, this is the part, and Professor mentioned about the risk register. On well-established organizations will have all the risk register. This could be business continuity and DRM, which they call disaster recovery plan, will be part of most of the companies. Luckily, I'm from a company where, and just to share few public information which is available. The first when pandemic hit, within 1.5 days time, our entire operation is still now working from home. So there is no impact on our entire operations, number one. You can see the public result which has come out for Tata Communication for this year. You will see the profit hitting all-time hit. So that means this is not a constraint that you need to go to the office and only work. So the trigger, what I'm trying to say is that what is more important for a risk person to understand that the trigger is a different, but that can multiple trigger can bring into one particular risk. I give a few more example. If you talk about the cyber risk, which is now mostly common and which is most of the organizations are impacting, I don't see that the company who is not indirectly in dealing with any customer have ever thought that they have a highest risk of keeping the customer data with them. They may be provided a service to an industry which deals with the direct customer, but because of their owning a data has become the highest risk for them. So basically, it is very important for a company to go back or any individual institute to go back and think what is their business objective. So and think from a very simplified process, and then goes and put into as complex as you can be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So I will now come to your question, which you talk about how we implemented the successful framework of the risk management. So the journey, I think, long back, many countries globally is requiring a risk management as a part of the listing requirement. So India may have come off late, and it's going to take more. I'll say more value in coming more further years, because we have seen the kind of impact which risk management will bring into. So for us to be listed in NYSE and in complex organization which has operation across more than 50 countries across the globe, it was very important from day one to put this complete framework of risk management. And yes, I remember Neeraj was mentioning about the COSO, so I'm a big fan of COSO framework, who has actually laid down this very simple philosophy of how do you manage the risk. And okay, though I will keep using the word manage the risk, but nowhere we are actually managing the risk. We are managing the mitigation or the reaction or the reaction time to control the risk, which automatically will trigger down the impact of the risk. So basically, the enterprise risk management framework is well defined in COSO. And if you go about COSO and simplify, this simply talks about the problem solving approach. If I put across a simple methodology, we say that you are and then keep doing a continuous improvement. So this is, if you put into a one cycle, the right-hand cycle will start from identifications to assessing the risk, the prioritization, and the left-hand side will go mitigation and monitoring of the risk. So one is the framework which has to be used to put into a standard risk management approach. But what is most important is beyond the framework is the culture. It's more important that the risk management culture is being embedded into the leaders of the company. So when I say culture building is means uh, everybody, when they do their own work, they manage the risk, but everybody has a different way of managing the risk, and at some time it is proven right or sometime it is proven wrong. So I think let's not get into that right or wrong, but what is more important is that the people are aware about the risk, they are conscious about the risk. And as Neeraj mentioned that there are 4T concept, which is typically called in the COSO, which takes about the similar to what the concept which was mentioned earlier, which is treat, take, terminate, and transfer the risk. So if anybody, any business leader understand that taking the risk is basically doing the business, you can't just sit down and stop doing business because there is a risk. And that's how the risk philosophy define inherent level risk or residual level risk, where you go and mitigate and say what risk you can do. So apart from a complete framework, and I'll talk about framework in few minutes, what is most important is the culture building. And culture doesn't build into a day's time. It takes time to continuously keep awareness and education to the all leaders in the company to understand the risk, to understand its impact both way. If you don't take risk, you will lose a big opportunity. So just typically, if I give an example for an organization like us, if we don't move to any geography, considering like, this country may have a lot of regulation, you will lose a big opportunity. So I think it's very important to keep the strategic decision out of the operational risk which you face, and then start moving into what if the risk is not taken. And I give one example. This is a very quote, which is probably, I'm sure most of you have heard it, that a CFO is asking CEO saying that I'm spending 10% of my costs in educating the or training or giving the right training or upskilling the employees. If we save this cost, we will increase more profit. And the CEO response is that if you don't spend this, then where you will get the 90% of the revenue. So I think the relevance of, with every risk, there is an opportunity, and the larger picture should not be forgotten because you don't want to take risks, so you can't stop the business. So that's a culture need to bring into what enterprise risk management brings is basically bring a discipline. It brings a continuously reviewing of all the risk as the organization faces, and continuously evolving and a known decision taken at the right level of the management, which actually de-risk to company to a certain extent. So what I will put into this format is that it is very important for first to build the culture, then to follow. There are various different approaches like take COSO, ISO 31000 is another approach. These approach will a suggestive guidelines to implement in a systematic way. But the most important, I think, the time which need to be spent more on the leadership. Now, then the second question comes is that from where the risk management should start? Should it start from the top or start from the bottom? And when I talk about, there's a two different theory which talks about. So the top-down approach is basically, it's very important that the vision, mission of the company is linked with the strategic goal, and then you create out what are the top risks to manage this. So unless there is a clarity on the strategic goal of the company, the risk management may try to fix few things which has no impact to the organization. So I'm not saying the bottom up risk is not important. Yes, that is too important, but is it going to impact on your overall organization's objectivity? So I think the alignment between the risk management and the normal management is very important. And that's where is the another point which I want to highlight. The risk management cannot be a separate activity. It has to be embedded into a normal course of the business. The owners who take the decisions or the business owners who take the decision, they need to understand and drive the risk management. The role of a risk manager will play is basically to facilitate them or educate them and show them what is the importance of the risk management and how differentiation a well thought risk management can bring into. So this often the concept that the risk management is a separate unit in the organization, which will be run by their own, but there will be hardly any success. You may have the best class of the risk management risk register. You may have a best class of there are a lot of now tools which is available to manage risk. But if you do not integrate this to the roles and the responsibility, and if you do not build into the culture of the organization, the success of the effective risk management will be question mark. So the third aspect which I was talking is more of the ownership of the risk management and at the right time. So this is I'm just mindful of the time which is allocated to me, Rajul. So correct me if I'm going on oversight. But what I'm trying to bring out here for an effective implementation of risk management, if we talk about the element, is pick up any kind of approach, which is suggestive approach provided, follow a logical steps into that. The second most important is to create a culture in the organization which talks about the risk management. And third is that the risk management need to be owned by the normal course of the business which has been done. It cannot be separated out. And the fourth most important is, which is like the reaction time. So as I was mentioning in the beginning, that it is not possible to eliminate risk to zero, then you will not be doing business. So what is most important is that what is the reaction time of all put together, all the efforts by all the different segment of the business to bring into this in the real life, is the response time is very important. And I just take example because most of the audience is related to education. With due their respect, it's almost now 1.5 years. Most traditional universities still not ready to conduct, the examination in the way it should be now in the pandemic change which has happened. So there is a challenge. I don't know the solution. I'm not talking about solution, but I'm saying the response time to react to that is still far, and we don't know when it will hit back. So the reaction time is very important, and none of the institute has reacted. It's not like that who is the first mover who has bring into, and I'm connecting this to what professor mentioned, that there will be destructive technology use will be coming into education institutes. So I think this is the reaction time is very important. Or take example of there are V-shaped recovery already happened to various organizations because they were able to reacted fast, and there are few still on the process. So, and it's not only because of the risk management, but the risk management plays a big role into that to bring it to that level. So I will just summarize my thoughts. One is that, it makes very simple and consider risk as a very simplest risk that you can face on an every day-to-day type lifetime, and then bring out to a systematic approach, bring out to the culture, the ownership of the risk mitigation and continuously monitoring. So if you put all together, you will see that, any event which happens, because the pandemic, what we keep hearing, certain studies will say is that such kind of scenario we may face multiple times in next few years. So I think it's the right time for us to now think back and decide and say, is this is a real risk, or the risk is that you do not get access to your office? Or what is the risk which you're talking about? Because the first deliberation, which is a very important aspect of risk identification. So if you identify risk rightly, you'll be able to get the right answer in the place. But the most important is that the identification itself is a crucial role, and which should be linked with the objective and the strategic goal of the company. So I will take a pause. If any question,
Yeah.
I will.
Thank you, Mr. Sanjay. And I really love the
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you.
You have to mitigate risk. You can also, it's all the. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Now you're audible, Raju.
Okay, perfect. So thank you.
Sorry, I missed again. I'm not able to hear you. Rajul, I'm not able to hear you.
matter if you're a student, professional, your age, your qualification, you have to be a risk manager in your own profession. Important, right? Of mitigation of
Rajul, I
as
think
Rajul,
there
I'm
is some technical
not able to
glitch.
hear you.
Rajul, if you can switch off your
Sanjay
video and
has said, time is important. Now, with that being said, my next professional am I audible?
yes, Rajul, now it's better.
Rajul, I was not able to hear you in last 5 minutes. Was there any question for me?
Yeah. So, thank you, Mr. Sanjay. Was I not audible the entire time?
Yeah, I was not able to
Yes, I
hear
think there
you
was some
entire time.
technical glitch. There was some technical glitch.
Okay, I'm so sorry. So thank you, Mr. Sanjay, for such an insightful session, and thank you, panelists. And I really love the idea, the insight of how it's not about actually a risk management; it's actually risk mitigation. And it doesn't matter which industry or university or sector you come from, you have to be a risk manager, right? Be it a CRO or a entry level professional or a student, it's very important. And what pandemic has taught us, the importance of risk management in one's life, right? Now, with that being said, my next question is to Mr. Harsha. And my question is, Mr. Harsh, how can students become qualified ERM professionals while studying at their college and university?
Yeah, thanks, Rajul, for the question. And firstly, my sincere thanks to Neeraj, Professor Arnab, and Sanjay for joining this panel discussion. Thank you to ASSOCHAM as well. As you all know, ASSOCHAM is a century-old trade body which is working with government, academia, and industry to foster relationships across the globe in terms of foreign trade, collaborations, educational activities, tie-ups, working hard even in the current crisis. And it's seen as a forceful, proactive, forward-looking institution working on a range of initiatives, including thought leadership reports. And it was established in 1920. Being a member of the National Council on Education, we are working very closely with the government and various departments for extending the policies in the education sector and including a lot of research projects and other activities. So this is a little bit about the ASSOCHAM. Before I answer Rajul's question, there are a few myths which I want to clear, and I think all the panelists will agree with me that if you want to start a career in risk management, is it important to really look at risk management as a dedicated role, or is it important for everyone to be risk intelligent? And if you look at some of the articles and some of the case studies across the world, most companies consider their primary risk management tools to be compliance programs, or they focus on internal controls and internal and external audits. So while reducing the incidence of ethical reporting and compliance violations is important, such a narrow focus prevents the risk management function from helping their companies manage a much larger and ever widening universe of risk. Now, if you pick up an example of a company called Swiss Grid, which is one of the reliable electricity network operators for Switzerland. And this is an interesting article in Harvard Business Review. They have this amazing app called Ristock, where every employee who joins the company has this software or a portable device, and they just have to press the button and say, today I have observed these risks, and I would like this to be an anonymous submission. And it's so interesting that towards the end of the day, all these risks are consolidated at a group level. Either it's a whistleblower or a fraud escalation or some local supply chain issue, or there would be something in the legal team or something in the reputation or marketing or branding department. But that is the kind of intelligence that they are trying to build across the enterprise. So yes, enterprise risk management is important, But today, as education leaders, you play an important role to nurture the risk literacy and the risk intelligence in the students. Whether they want to work in technology, they want to work in fintech, they want to work in pharmaceutical, procurement, logistics, legal, marketing, branding, they want to set up their own brand agency. It could be a range of opportunities, but they need to understand that risk is going to be there in every area and every vertical and every sector. So are they well equipped to identify and manage these risks? They need not be a risk manager. So pursuing enterprise risk management is not only important for a career in risk management, it is going to be important for every single person. And like Professor Arnab said, whether you are coming from a different background or as education institutions, you look at an overall risk management framework at a leadership level or even at a junior accountant level, they are going to manage risk. Today, if a student is getting picked up by a corporate organization in the FMCG or retail sector, I'm sure the KPI and the KRA of that particular job role today will demand that risk should be identified and managed by that role. That is the smartness that is expected from today's generation. So firstly, let's clear the myth that enterprise risk management or management education is only important if you have a career in risk management, right? 20 years back, there was this whole wave of financial literacy. Today, we feel that it is important that every student becomes risk literate, which means they know the pros and the cons. Right from the time they wake up till the time they sleep, they are constantly taking decisions. As organizations, we are constantly taking decisions, whether to acquire a company, whether to diversify into a new sector, whether to launch an IPO, whether to take a debt of $100 million or to set up a plant in Japan or to buy raw materials from Australia or to invest in another company which is completely different from my sector. Now, if these decisions do not consider the negative sides, do not consider the cons, how are they going to promote risk-based decision making? So as an individual, as a student too, whether you want to wear a mask, whether you want to go down, you want to take a trip, you want to give a loan to your friend, you want to start a new venture, you want to go abroad for your MBA, you are constantly taking decisions. So the summary here is risk-based decision making, risk-based thinking is very, very crucial. And ERM education is going to promote this skill. It's not necessary whether you become a risk manager or a chief risk officer or a CFO or a CEO. You will be risk ready. You will be in a much mature position to manage any kind of risk. The number two part is I need to be in a financial function or I need to have finance background to take up a formal enterprise risk management education. And again, this is a myth. Yes, 20 years back, corporate risk managers had zero public visibility. Most were back office jobs where they used to focus on securing insurance for environmental and real estate problems. And young people didn't aspire to be risk managers because it was a very core technical job. You're just looking at foreign exchange, market risk, and credit risk, and all these other financial aspects of risk. But today, the role is much more complex. It demands a wide range of requirements, right from your communication skills to handle employees, to handling media in a crisis, to understanding a company's balance sheet from a risk perspective. Chief risk officers today are in demand. In fact, the SEBI's new regulation under the LODR mandates the top 1,000 listed companies to have a dedicated risk management committee. So these chief risk officers are going to be the future heroes in the boardrooms because it's not just the COVID. Every 3 years, like Sanjay and Neeraj said, every 3 years, we're going to see a wave of external uncertainties. And how prepared are we? That's the role that the CRO is going to play at the board level to constantly work hard across departments, across interconnected events to try and reduce the impact of the risk. Not all risk can be mitigated, but the impact can be reduced, right? Now, how do you become a qualified ERM professional? And yes, you do have multiple qualifications. There are institutions which offer an MBA in risk management, and it's available across the world. We see one in Birmingham University. There's Glasgow Caledonian University. In Hong Kong, there are some universities which offer a dedicated MBA specialization. Then you have the FRM exam, which focuses on financial risk management, and that is very, very essential if you want to work in a bank or an insurance company or a financial institution. But I'll talk a little bit about the IRM's Enterprise Risk Management exam. So IRM is headquartered in the UK. We are present across 143 countries. There are 5,000 exam centers across the world. And what used to happen back in time is a lot of the students from India used to go abroad to give these examinations because they were written. There weren't any exam centers available in India. But with the India project and India operations, the exam centers are now available. There are 360 centers. Candidates can appear for the professional examinations from level 1 to level 5 enterprise risk alongside their graduation. So if your students have completed 12th and they want to become qualified in enterprise-wide risk, which includes managing reputation, managing a water crisis, managing a cyber attack, or a climate change, or even a pandemic with another event after 5 years, all these categories of risks are covered in the level 1 to level 5 examinations. We are working very closely with the AICT, and we're trying to integrate the level 1 to level 5 examinations across reputed universities and colleges so that the students can avail the benefit of certain scholarships, and they can also get a premium in their salary once they are out of their graduation. So you're not just a BCom or a BAF or a BMS or a BBI student, but with a BCom, you have an add-on qualification just like a CA or a CFA. You could also get your IRM credentials. And you'll be glad to know that Mr. Neeraj has successfully completed the senior executive route to the certified membership, which is at level 4. Mr. Sanjay is a technical specialist elected by the IRM. So there are a range of industry luminaries who are available as part of the ecosystem. We have one of the largest communities of chief risk officers across 143 countries. And this is a clear pathway for anyone who wants to become a risk intelligent business leader, not just in financial risk, but in enterprise risk, and also a chief risk officer. So I thought this would just be relevant for all the education institutions to kind of understand how can your students become future ready, risk ready, and be able to play a significant role in organizations that are trying to work through a crisis. So back to you, Rajul. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are rolling out a feedback form. It's on the chat box, and I would love if the participant could fill the form. And you can follow us on our official social media handle. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Instagram. You can log on to our website, www.theirmindia.org, where you can know more about ERM and various risks. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, participants.
We'll just wait if there are any questions on the Q&A.
I've shared the feedback form again. Dear participants, could you just click on the link and share your kind feedback with us? We really, really appreciate it.
Okay, so we have one question which I've received. How are the actions taken to mitigate ERM different from those in the case of financial risk management? I'll leave it to any of the panelists to answer this. How are the actions taken to mitigate ERM different from those in the case of financial risk?
So I'll take it, Harsh. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
No, go ahead. Sanjay.
No,
wants-
please.
Go ahead, Sanjay.
Okay. No, so I was just trying to add that sometimes the financial sections are or financial risk management actions are typically for a particular period, and that has linkage to the financials output, which you may have to incur at certain point of time. But the enterprise risk management is much broader, and it has one consideration of the financials. Just take example, if you have, say, regulatory risk, and if you have to manage a regulatory risk, the financial will come at the last, which says that in case if you are not able to comply with what could be the penalty. But the first question will come is that what all has to be done to make us compliant to the regulatory requirement. So it is not looking into the final consequence, it's looking into a more of a process or a structured process to deal with what is the required in the regulatory section. And then how can, as organizations, we can deal it. And if you don't do, then what could be the last impact on the financials number? Take another example of the reputation risk. So reputation risk is cannot build by one instance, but what is the core principle of the company and how the core principle need to be educated to all the different stakeholders, whether it's a customer, whether it's a vendor, whether it's any employee who connect with, or whether it's a mass media, what all steps need to be taken to do that. So that's talk more about the mitigation of the risk than just a financial risk. I hope I'm able to give some distinction between these two.
I
Sure.
just
And
probably add
Neeraj,
on
you want to add?
to,
Yeah.
just add to what Sanjay just said. So basically, it is not different. It is like Sanjay rightly said. These are all linked concepts. I guess the context will be more in light of let's say how close is the financial risk to the core strategy of a business. For example, for a bank or a NBFC company, financial risk would be probably sit at the core. An asset liability mismatch risk would be at the center and the core of a bank or for a NBFC. So it's all contextual as to where does the financial risk sit in the overall strategic context. And when you prioritize the risk, in terms of their inherent severity, where does the financial risk sit? So that will probably determine whether it is indeed a synonym for risk management for an enterprise, or are there other equally, if not more critical or high severity risks that need to be considered?
So
we have one. Professor Arnab, if you would like to add.
So there is one question from Mr. Vinod Gopal Mukherjee, and he asked that what type of risk you foresee in management schools. Now, management schools being professional finishing schools, we see a huge amount of risk, all of which I don't think I can talk about here. But a few things I can just say for you to think about. One is that the first major risk that I see is a mismatch between the output of the business school or the management school and the expectations of the industry. So that is a major risk. Second is that the changing nature of business itself. As business becomes more technologically mediated, more prone to virtual working, and I was delighted to hear from Sanjay that Tata Communications has worked entirely virtual for this long period of more than a year. So you can immediately see that some of the things that we teach in business schools, which sort of revolve around the theme that human-to-human interaction, actually will become less important. I will not say that it will vanish, but it will become less important. So how do you build relationships? How do you build teams? How do you keep people motivated? How do you engage with them on a regular basis in a virtual environment? Okay, so that will be something that the industry would expect our students to know. And if they don't know it, then it's, of course, that is a risk both to your students because they are not properly skilled, and also to yourself as a reputational risk of your program, because the employers will soon say that your program does not meet what they had expected for. So So these two, and we have a huge talent issue here. So we do not get people who we would like for teaching. So so there is an issue of how you retain your best professors in the system. How do you keep them compensated? A very good professor is always likely to get good offers from the industry and can move. How do you engage with industry itself? How do you bring the talent that is available in the industry into your school? So there are a whole lot of risks that management schools face, particularly in the current times. And I see an acceleration in the intensity of the risk in the coming few years. So it will be a very interesting time for us in management schools.
Thank you. The next question is, what are the sub-risks which constitute an ERM program? I think we've briefly covered this, that all departments are generally a part of enterprise risk management, but probably the participant wants to know more on the category and the types of risks that exist under the ERM program. So again, any of the panelists, if you'd like to answer this.
Yeah, so if I simplify, can I take this?
Yeah.
So just to simplify, a higher level, I think it talks about start from the financial risk, then it goes to the regulatory risk and compliance risk. Then it comes to the operational risk, which is a very key part. So this is, basically there are two factors of risk. One is the internal drivers and the external driver. So, so the internal driver is largely depend on the operational risk which you have, which can increase the efficiency typically, or speed of your executions. Then it talks about market risk, which is there, and the last one is the reputation risk. So if you actually bifurcate into these 4 or 5, yes, sorry to add one more, which is the cyber related risk. The cyber risk has been created a new category itself because it's a huge risk to manage. And if you classify into the 6 or 7 category, you will cover pretty much everywhere, every operation into the organization. So everything come under the umbrella.
Neeraj, you'd like to add anything to this, or?
No, pretty much, I guess Sanjay has nicely explained. Broadly, I guess it is having clarity on what are the strategic risks and what are the operating risks. I think if that prism is applied, that lens is applied, a lot of clarity starts to emerge. But I guess Sanjay has kind of covered it quite nicely.
So I will just add that in organization, risks do not have categories as such. What may look like a financial risk may have very important fallout in operations, and what may look like an operations risk can have very important fallout in finance. So I think one of the key learnings of ERM is that risks are interconnected, and that I think should be remembered. I'm not saying that categories don't exist, but the categories are interconnected among themselves, and that I think is to be remembered when we're discussing enterprise risk.
Sure. We have next question, which is, do you think the expectation of the stakeholders are the same at all times? They are very dynamic and they keep changing from time to time. So how does one manage the risk of stakeholder expectations? I think this comes from the overall extended enterprise or value chain of an enterprise. How do you manage multiple stakeholders, whether it's your employees, your suppliers, the government, regulators, etc.? So probably from an education point of view, Professor Arnab could answer, because I believe
so I think
the premier
one of the advantages of having an ERM system or ERM in operation in an organization is that it will open a window to the outside world. And when you are sort of looking at the risk that your organization face from a changing environmental context, environmental means the business environmental context, and how it impacts your objectives, I think you will figure out that stakeholder expectations are a key part of it. And once you recognize what the stakeholders are expecting from you, what are the regulators are expecting from you, what is the society expecting from you, then you will be able to mitigate some part of it as you go ahead. So I think having an ERM is a very good thing. If you want to really keep an eye on the changing stakeholder expectations.
Okay. Neeraj, Sanjay, anyone wants to add to this or?
Yeah, just one perspective very quickly. See, it is what
No,
I
I think
had
you covered very nice.
yeah, what I had mentioned, I'll just continue just for a couple of minutes in the beginning, which is about identifying positive outcome or increasing the positive outcome and reducing negative surprises. So stakeholders. Now let's talk about let's say an investor. An investor would always want to optimize the worth or the value of their ownership. An employee would always want to be assured of reasonable growth in their career and consistency, stability, and career enrichment options. So whichever stakeholder you pick, nobody wants negative surprises. Now, the issues happen after a risk has materialized and there weren't enough sufficient identification or any mitigation that was thought through. That is the point in time, I guess, the management team or the leadership team gets scrutinized for not adequately being prepared or aware or dealing with that situation. And then this question comes that why could this risk not have been identified? So that's how stakeholders typically look at. So risk management is that kind of an activity which remains in the back end a lot of times, but then it comes in the front very quickly when there is an event or something materializes, and that's where I guess the relevance is then tested and examined very, very thoroughly. So just one perspective to consider.
Sure, and probably I'll address this question to Sanjay. Is ERM the best to cover and ensure sustainability development? I don't know if this is from an ESG perspective, but probably does ERM help in building sustainable enterprises?
So, what I mentioned, I think what I mentioned is that there is no measurement which says that, ERM is a success tool which can be used and implement and you'll get everything in one place. Actually, it's other way around. The approach in ERM will help us to keep all the initiative which company takes, whether under ESG, whether it's a sustainability, whether it's now retaining the people or achieving the objective of the organizations. The process which is followed in the ERM is much more logical to see what are the risk and opportunity coming into, and what are the possible way which can it be managed, and what is the possible duration by when you can revert it back. So I will to conclude that the approach can help in all the aspects of the organization, whether it's a sustainability or ESG process.
Sure. Okay. Great. I think we'll stop taking questions now due to paucity of time. And thank you all the panelists once again. Thank you to ASSOCHAM. Deepak ji, over to you if you'd like to conclude the session.
Ji, sir. Thank you so much, Harsha. It really was a great session, and I would like to thank Professor Arnab ji, Professor Sanjay Mathur ji, Neeraj Basur ji, and as well as Rajul for coordinating and implementation the topic which is the need of the hour. अगर हम बात करते हैं रिस्क मैनेजमेंट की, जैसे अभी हर्ष साहब ने हर्ष जी ने कहा कि हम लोग एक पॉजिटिविटी की अगर बात करते हैं, अगर हम जापान में या कहीं पर भी एक इंडस्ट्री लगाने की बात करते हैं, तो हम उसके साथ साथ एक नेगेटिव की बात करते हैं कि उसके साथ साथ जो हमारे रिस्क की जो बातें होती हैं उसको भी हम लोग एक साथ लेके चलें कि दीज आर द रिस्क विच आर गोइंग टू हैपन. जैसे हमारे संजय साहब ने बात करी कि आज से पहले कभी पेंडेमिक में जैसे टाटा कंसल्टेशन ने जब से शुरू हुआ, दे अलाउ देम टू वर्क फ्रॉम दी होम. So it's a good thing that they are initiated, and that's why all the organizations, those who are into the telecom or they are into the IT sector, they are give them the freedom to do work from home until the COVID is exist. So actually, I would like to thank each and every eminent speaker to be a part of this wonderful session, and hope we are going to soon again on the ASSOCHAM platform as well. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.